The secret story. Inside Vietnamese DNA, what if Vietnam's ancient bloodline didn't begin with dragons or kings, but with a people so old their DNA is nearly forgotten? What if the legendary origins of Vietnam were never meant to be literal, but a cover for a deeper genetic saga written in blood, bone and time? For centuries, Vietnam has told itself a beautiful origin myth of a dragon lord, Lac Long Quan, and a mountain fairy, Au Co. From their union came 100 sons, the first Vietnamese. Half went to the mountains, half to the sea, a perfect story of unity from the beginning. But DNA tells a very different tale. Deep beneath the romantic legend lies a forgotten chapter, one hidden in the caves, the soil, and the teeth of the dead. In Tampa Ling, a cave in northern Laos, scientists discovered a human skull, not from a medieval dynasty, but from 56,500 years ago. A fossil from a time before history had a name. This person was one of Southeast Asia's earliest modern humans, and the deeper researchers dig, the stranger it gets. They uncovered a people known as the Hoabinhian, hunter-gatherers who roamed the rainforests of ancient Vietnam as early as 70,000 BCE. These were the real first Vietnamese. They left behind stone tools, bone ornaments, and burial sites. They shaped this land before kingdoms, borders, or rice. But here's the shock. Despite thousands of years of dominance, their DNA is almost completely erased from the genome of modern kin Vietnamese. Almost no trace remains. It's as if they were deleted. Yet their genetic legacy isn't totally gone. It survives, faintly, in a few minority groups, living in isolated mountain ranges, clinging to languages and customs outsiders barely understand. It's a haunting twist. The people who first walked this land, who named the rivers and hunted its forests, are now ghosts in the national genome. And that leads to a chilling question. If the Hoabinhian were here first, then who exactly replaced them? And how did they take over so completely without leaving a trace? They didn't bring swords. They brought rice and reshaped a continent. That silence, the one left behind by the Hoabinhian, it wasn't filled by conquerors. It was filled by farmers. No flags, no battles, just the rhythmic sound of irrigation and the soft crunch of stone tools shaping futures. Around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, they began to arrive. Migrants from what is now southern China. These Neolithic settlers weren't warriors, but what they carried was just as powerful. Domesticated rice, pottery, shouldered stone axes, and something far more lasting, their genes. They came not as an army, but as a movement, a demographic tide, and they brought with them a genetic code that would soon become the backbone of Vietnam's population. Modern science calls it the two-layer admixture model, and it's exactly what it sounds like. One ancient population buried beneath another. The farmers brought food security, population growth, social complexity, and the hunter-gatherers. They either adapted or disappeared. Buried in the soil of Man-Bac, dated between 4,100 and 1,700 years before present, archaeologists uncovered skeletons with genetic fingerprints revealing this exact moment in history. Part Hoabinhian, part East Asian farmer. An admixture in motion. And here's the twist. Those early hybrids still echo today. The Nicobarese, the Mlabri. Austroasiatic-speaking peoples who diverged from that ancient genetic event and carried it, unchanged, through time. But for the modern kin, Vietnam's largest ethnic group, that farmer ancestry took over completely. Over 94% of their DNA now links back to that Neolithic wave. A transformation so total, it's almost invisible. No war, No destruction, just survival by cultivation. The sword lost to the seed, but just as Vietnam's identity began to root itself in this new beginning, something else stirred, a signature in the DNA that didn't come from the north, but from the sea. Because while rice grew in the lowlands, islander blood was quietly rising in the highlands. What if one of Vietnam's oldest genetic legacies didn't come from the north, or even the land, but from women who carried the ocean in their blood and walked the mountains? This wasn't supposed to happen. Researchers were tracing Vietnam's genetic past, expecting neat lines, clean migrations, predictable ancestry maps. The assumption was simple. People came from the north, down through the valleys, across the rivers. Right. But then, the genome broke that narrative. Because buried in the mitochondrial DNA, the maternal line passed from mother to child, they found something completely unexpected. Austronesian ancestry, the kind normally associated with seafaring islanders, people like the Atayal of Taiwan, the Malayo-Polynesian voyagers, the earliest Pacific sailors. And yet, it wasn't in Vietnam's coastal ports where this legacy remained strongest. It was in the mountains. Among the Giarai and Ida, two ethnic groups in Vietnam's central highlands, whose cultures are matrilineal, whose daughters inherit land, whose children take their mother's clan name, whose women don't just raise families, they preserve lineages. Silently, powerfully, genetically, this changes everything. Because unlike most Vietnamese populations, where Y-DNA or paternal ancestry dominates, here it's the mtDNA that holds the ancient signal. A signal that connects them not only to the Cham, but to populations across southern China, Hainan and Taiwan. This isn't north to south. This isn't land to land. This is island to inland, a migration carried by women, preserved through daughters and hidden in highland forests. It flips the map. It reverses the time. And it challenges everything we thought we knew about how Vietnam was formed. Because most of Vietnam's history was shaped by farmers and kings, this one was written by mothers. But just north of this Austronesian echo lies a historical contradiction. How can a 1,000-year occupation leave no genetic scar? For over a millennium, China ruled Vietnam. So why don't their genes rule too? It doesn't make sense at first. From 111 BCE to 939 CE, Vietnam lived under Chinese domination. Not for decades, but for over 1,000 years. Through the Han, Tang and later dynasties, emperors ruled from afar, sending administrators, soldiers, scholars. They renamed towns, imposed taxes, introduced Confucian bureaucracy. They attempted to reshape identity, from language to land. And yet, when scientists began scanning Vietnamese genomes, the results told a different story. There's barely a trace of distinct Han Chinese DNA in the modern Kind population, not even close to what you would expect from a millennium of rule. Instead of genetic takeover, we find resistance, not just political, but biological. The reason lies buried deeper in time, before the Han ever arrived. Vietnamese and southern Chinese groups already shared something ancient, a common ancestry. The Bai Yue or Bach Viet people, indigenous tribes who once stretched across southern China and northern Vietnam. Long before the Han Empire, long before recorded history, so when China arrived with its armies, the bloodlines were already familiar, but what changed was culture. Vietnam didn't become China, it became Vietnam, defined by rebellion, not absorption. Heroes like the Trung sisters led uprisings, myths were rewritten, language diverged, identity hardened. Today the Hoa people, modern Chinese Vietnamese, trace their presence not to Han occupation, but to French colonial policies that brought new waves of migrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And even now, they remain culturally distinct, a reminder that identity isn't just DNA. It's memory, choice, resistance. But while the Chinese Empire came and went, another kingdom, older, native, didn't survive so cleanly. It didn't resist. It was absorbed. Yet while one empire left no trace, another kingdom was nearly erased by Vietnamese expansion. What if a civilization vanished not in battle, but in silence, without even passing on its DNA? They called it Nam Tien, the southward march. It didn't happen in one invasion. It unfolded over centuries. A slow, unrelenting push beginning in the 11th century and accelerating through the 1300s and 1400s CE. Vietnamese kingdoms, rising in the north, crept deeper into the lands once ruled by Champa. Champa wasn't a myth, it was real. A Hindu-Buddhist kingdom of towers, Sanskrit inscriptions, royal courts, stretched across central Vietnam, rich in trade, connected to India, Java and beyond, and then it was gone. You can still see its bones, the red brick towers of my son, sandstone statues, the ghost of a language once whispered in marketplaces. But when geneticists studied modern Vietnamese DNA, they found almost nothing. No detectable Cham ancestry in the kin majority. A kingdom erased. Without war cries, without memorials, just silence. DNA samples from modern Cham communities, now fragmented and marginalised, reveal a bottleneck, a sudden collapse around 700 years ago. The timing matches perfectly. It's as if something, or someone, stopped their bloodline cold. Vietnam inherited Cham architecture, Cham vocabulary, even absorbed religious symbols, but not their people. How can a civilization leave behind towers, but not children? This isn't just about erasure. It's about what survives and what doesn't. Because while stone temples still reach for the sky, Cham DNA no longer lives in the bloodlines of Vietnam's lowlands. Which raises a deeper question. If the plains and cities have overwritten their past, could something older still echo in the heights? But if the lowlands erased the past, the mountains preserved it, deep in the blood of forgotten tribes. Some of Vietnam's oldest ancestors aren't in museums. They're alive, walking in the hills. They may seem invisible on tourist maps, but walk into the mist-shrouded highlands of northern Vietnam, and you'll find them, living time capsules. The Hmong, the Silla, the Khmuic peoples, tribes whose forebears basked in the first rays of Southeast Asian human history. Their DNA carries something extraordinary, up to 11% Hobbinian ancestry, the same lineage nearly wiped clean from the genome of the lowland kin majority, whose marker is virtually zero. That's not a rumour. That's genetic truth revealed through recent genome sequencing. Isolated for centuries, hidden by geography and sidelined by history, these peoples endured extreme population bottlenecks. Their bloodlines narrowed into unique genetic variants unseen anywhere else on the continent. These variants aren't just biological. They are echoes of ancient landscapes, rituals, and spiritual ties to the land. Language only tells part of the story. Many of these tribes speak tongues that defy classification, like notes in a code everyone lost. Their culture shifted, but their genes remained stubbornly ancient. The language changed, but the blood remembered. Imagine it. You are walking through a dense forest, mist wrapping around your shoulders, and beside you walks a living archive, someone carrying a fragment of 70,000 BCE lineage, long before kings or myths just by virtue of their DNA. There's emotional gravity in that. Not just scientific fascination, but the realization that some living humans carry the original heart of this land. They aren't relics in cabinets. They are living testimony. Their presence reshapes identity, rewriting heritage. Because the legacy of the first Vietnamese isn't gone. It is there, beating beneath the canopy. Then came 2025, and a national project would blow the door off everything we thought we knew. When scientists sequenced the Vietnamese genome, they didn't just find answers, they found 8.5 million new mysteries. It began with a question. How well do we really know ourselves? In 2025, Vietnam launched one of the most ambitious DNA projects in Southeast Asian history, the VN1K project. Over 1,000 complete genomes sequenced, not fragments, full blueprints, blood and bone mapped base by base. And then, the twist. Scientists didn't just find what they were expecting. They uncovered 8.5 million genetic variants that had never been seen before. Not in European datasets, not in Chinese, Korean or American populations. Entire stretches of the Vietnamese genome were uncharted territory. Some of these hidden codes could shape life and death. Variants in PMFBP1, HFE, and others affect liver disease, iron absorption, and immune response. Others touch drug metabolism, influencing how Vietnamese bodies react to Western medications. Even the APOE EE4 allele tied to Alzheimer's showed risk patterns closer to Korean and Japanese populations, forcing doctors to rethink long-held assumptions. This isn't just history anymore. This is precision medicine built from ancestry, not for another country, not from global averages, but from Vietnamese blood shaped by monsoons, fish sauce, rice fields, and centuries of survival. And with every newly mapped sequence, the picture got clearer, but something else was hiding. Because in the middle of this scientific triumph, just when they thought they were closing the book, a new sequence emerged, one that matched no living group, no known nation, no recorded tribe. It wasn't just new, it was untraceable. A ghost, a shadow, a whisper from a people no one remembers. But even as scientists celebrated, a ghost from the past appeared, carrying a genome that matched no known people. And just like that, DNA reminded us that borders are recent, but bloodlines are ancient, overlapping, unresolved. A genome with no match, no culture, no language, no memory. It surfaced not as a clue, but as a challenge. Because when you uncover something that doesn't belong to any known people, you're not just rewriting the past. You're questioning everything we've called identity. And that brings us to today. Modern Vietnamese, especially the Kinh majority, often turn to commercial DNA tests, hoping for clarity, hoping to see a clean pie chart that says 50% Southeast Asian, 50% Chinese. But identity doesn't work like that. Yes, Vietnamese and southern Chinese populations do share a common proto-Mongoloid ancestor, a ghost of a migration that once spread from southern China through the Red River Delta. But that was thousands of years ago. Since then, everything has diverged. Culturally, politically, emotionally. Cantonese populations, for instance, have become more northern shifted, influenced by centuries of Han governance. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese took another path, one carved through resistance, through independence, through war. The story isn't just in genes, it's what people refuse to become. Ethnicity, it turns out, isn't a category. It's a construction, a choice, a resistance. DNA might reveal where you came from, but it cannot define who you are. Because Vietnamese identity wasn't downloaded. It was built piece by piece by rebellions, migrations, alliances and losses. It's why even the same blood can tell two different stories. And one of those stories didn't end at the Mekong. Some bloodlines didn't stay. They crossed the water. And in the next episode, we follow the forgotten cousins of Vietnam, those who sailed across oceans carrying the same fire in their genes.